And
this is it now, Gary, isn't it? We were talking earlier about how you're going to develop the organisation. So I know you've just put in a bid for charity status.
Yep. So we're awaiting that, and hopefully the Charities Commission might give us a wonderful Christmas present in giving us our full charitable status, and that will then, it will change the dynamic of what we're doing, because we can go out and get some strong funding, hopefully some strong backing, and that will enable us then to reach back out to some of the areas that we've had to pull away from because of the pandemic, and hopefully provide that service to the men and women and their families and their children that need help, that need a little bit of direction. If we can build up that team again,
and
that'd be
whether
wonderful.
they're serving or ex-serving officers.
Absolutely.
And,
sort of going right back to the beginning, the reason sort of I thought about setting this up with Simon, the other co-founder, was because of my experience. My wife, she did just over 30 years, I think 31 years in total in the Metropolitan Police, and she dealt with some horrible stuff. She spent, I would suggest, at least half, if not more, of her career dealing with child protection. Very unpleasant task. She never really spoke about it. There's only one or two occasions that I can remember that she actually wanted to sit down and talk about that darker side of the job, because it had really impacted on her. But like everyone else in the job, she just got on with it. She was determined that, the perpetrators who were doing this just dreadful stuff to kids would end up serving custodial sentences. And that was her drive, as was that of her team. But it was never anywhere for them to go and discuss that, And so for me, when I got to that very dark place and I'd lost everything, and, the only way out for me was to end it all by taking my own life, I used to think that was such a selfish thing to do, because I turned up to so many of those jobs, hundreds of fatalities on the railway. And, I used to think about the poor train driver. They can't turn left or right, they can't stop. They've just got to, unfortunately, go through that experience. We then turn up, then you've got the ambulance people, the fire people turning to, and then, sadly, the undertakers. And it is just such a horrible story. And then from our perspective, you would often, if you deem the situation as being a non-suspicious death, i.e. there was no one around that person to push them, to trip them, to whatever, when they took their life by suicide, you would then invariably get down on the track. Once you got clearance to do so, you would collect the deceased, you'd have to search the deceased, and then, escort them to the hospital, book them into the mortuary, and then go away and deliver that grief message. Nothing again prepares you for that, and even talking about it in the training process, and you're being taught by men and women that have been in the job for quite a while and have had that experience. All they can give you is the benefit of their experience. It's not until you're physically there to do it yourself. There's no words. It's just it's a very difficult situation. And again, when you come away from it, you question yourself. Did I do that right? Did I say the right thing? And every time you do it, it's a different delivery. And that sounds a bit weird. You think you'd have a script. You do to a degree, but it's always, every job was different. So, whether you was dealing with an older person.
You can't have a script, can you?
No, you've got to turn
up. Like you
up.
say, there are certain.
Yeah, and just have an open book, really.
A certain method, but
and it's,
you're
again,
human as well. So
it's that horrible thing where you try not to show too much empathy, but sometimes it's unavoidable. And as you're delivering that message, all the family want to know, because often they don't know that family member's going to take that tragic route. There's often not a suicide note. There's this perception, there's always a suicide note. There's not. So, I was the first one I ever did. it was sort of like I went in, and I remember being just sort of bolt upright, and I had my flat cap under my arm, and I just stood there like a bloody guardsman, because I didn't know how to react, because I was struggling to deliver that message. The family around me were all breaking down, and I had a sergeant with me, and before we went in, he just said to me, right, think of this as it ain't our fault, Mum. And I'm sort of like, do what? He says, lovely boy, shoulders back, get in there, just tell him, and then we're out. And you think, goodness me, is it that easy? And I just remember being in a horrible state.
In a state of shock as
well.
well.
Absolutely. Especially because I'd just done that awful part of doing what we just spoken about. So I know, sadly, what condition they're in, and you get asked all these questions. The family start hitting you. Did it hurt? Why did he do it? This and you can't answer the questions. You want to, but you don't want to lead them down that path, because you could say something that's quite inappropriate and clearly wrong. And if a job went to coroner's court, that would often come back and bite you in the bum. So it was just sort of like, try and keep it brief, to the point, and then get out. But after that one, if I had to deliver the messages, then I would simply, if I got a bit emotional, I'll cry, because it's just a horrible thing. But once you left that family, that's just another little bit of trauma to go in your big box of trauma that's building up, that you're never going to get out there because you don't want to talk. So yeah, it was a strange old situation.
Yeah. Well, Gary, shall we talk about what's happening now then, in terms of what your next steps are? Obviously, we're going for the charity status. We want to do all we can to help with the awareness and that message. You're not alone.
And that's the key thing. I think having, you guys behind us in this partnership now, because you're so well known nationally, and people always look at little organisations like ourselves and they'll look to see who's partnering with them, and often that is a real huge positive, because when you've got a good body of people like yourselves in partnership with us, and we've got other partners, Sterling Distillery, Irwin Mitchell, there's too many to mention. We're going to build on that.
Yeah.
And the rationale for next year will be quite simple. Keep raising the awareness, keep delivering our awareness training, get involved with many aspects of fundraising as we can. And we've got 3 guys next year doing some incredible events for us that we need to sort of try and help them with, getting the right packages together for them. They're going to be covering hundreds of miles to raise money for us. They're all serving police officers, firearms officers, and we'll do our absolute best to support them in whichever way we can, and that will encourage other people to do likewise. And once we get the charitable status, there's all the add-ons that go with that, with gift aid and stuff like that, and stronger donation. Only last week I got invited up to Portcullis House at Parliament to sit as part of a panel looking at mental health within the military, but also now very strongly at our emergency services. And there was a lot of good ideas that came out of that. We've been invited a year from that day to go back next year and to see what progress has been made. And when I was with Yorkshire Police last week, we discussed some of the protocols that we were discussing at Parliament, and they're already on board, so that's great. And we're working now with an ex-army colleague of mine who's set up a body of people and an amazing thing called Lost and Found, and it's specifically for families that have members that are dealing with Alzheimer's and stuff like that, who sadly often just get up and walk away, and just because they're in that special little bubble that they're in, they'll take themselves off. So the encouraging thing there is that families that have family members who are struggling with Alzheimer's and dementia, they can give the police as much information about that individual as possible, and as soon as that person goes missing, the police, they've got a database of information. They're given a specific password, because obviously we need to protect all that information. They will then get a screen that will come up and tell them exactly where that person was last found, so we can get officers directed to that area, and hopefully prevent any sort of life-changing injuries. It's brilliant. So we're working really hard with that. We've got other little things that we're working on. We're going to make a second film to follow up Broken Glass that we did with our president, Graham Cole. OBE, I have to keep mentioning the OBE. And we're going to sort of target this next film on a female paramedic who has a very traumatic incident, and how that's dealt with. And then we'll sort of complete the filmmaking with a third film that will be relevant to the fire service, and that's already something that we're starting to pencil in and look at. We're going to be making some training videos for supervisors. Is there ever a right way or a wrong way to engage with your team, especially if a team member's coming up with a bit of a problem, especially around their mental health? So all we're going to keep doing is chipping away at breaking down those barriers that we as individuals put up anyway. But if we can encourage the industry, for want of a better word, to start looking outside of that blinkered box of just turn up, put your kit on and get out, they'll start looking at mental health and well-being, because it is key. It's got to, because they're losing so many people across the services now to suicide, long-term sickness through mental health, and often people are getting ill health retired now, often not diagnosed with post-traumatic stress because it will cost the job in a claim, and that's another sad fact that we need to look at. Again, just reinforcing that you've only got that brain injury because of the repeated trauma that you've been to, and you've not had that release of talking to a clinical professional to help you through that period. And we've got to change that. It's so important, to keep the boots on the ground for them.
Brilliant. You're doing it.
We're getting there.
You're doing it.
We're not going to give up.
So your team's growing.
Yeah.
And that's good news. Your partnerships are growing.
Yeah.
And we're certainly, can't believe. I mean, as I say, we hear a lot of stories from our customers, and we try and put it out there as well in terms of, people doing extraordinary work.
Yeah.
I'm
very lucky in the respect that the team around me are, it's changed over the recent years, but it's changed for the better, because the people, if we were to say sort of key figures, so Graham Cole, OBE, everyone remembers him from the bill as PC Tony Stamp, and his character in his almost 30-year career on the TV playing that individual. He went through, if you was to look at it and break it down, a hell of a lot of trauma. But it was never a scene where he was actually talking to a clinician or a doctor, and that's so real, and it is so relevant. Danny Cotton, our Vice President, former Chief of the London Fire Brigade. Danny experienced some awful traumas during her time as a firefighter, through to becoming the Chief. And if there was ever a critical moment in her career, I would suggest it's Grenfell. And Danny really struggles with the aftermath of Grenfell fire, and that was how we were introduced to each other. Danny knew about us, and she invited me up to Southwark to her headquarters to talk to her firefighters, because she'd come out and said, look, I'm really struggling with my mental health as a result of Grenfell, but also of all the other stuff that she's dealt with, but realistically not really spoken about it in detail. Now, if you've got someone like the Chief, who was quite open and frank about her own mental health, talking, brilliant, absolutely fantastic, because it then encourages others. And remember, the fire service, a bit like the police and ambulance, there's the old sticklers in there who are not talking to anyone, just going to head down, arse up, crack on. And, I'm not saying it's right, it's not wrong, but at some stage you will need to talk to someone. So other key players within our organisation have all had some association with post-traumatic stress or mental health in one way or another. You know, it makes it that bit more special, if it can be special in that sort of sense. You know, we're not just reading from a script.
What you're really saying is, if you can get these key players actually speaking out, then that's going to have a big impact on what you're trying to do.
And you know, once we get that charitable status, then trust me, they'll be thrown into the arena and they'll be delivering their stories. You know, at the end of the presentation we give, so we have a case study, and it's my little story, but you know, I always say it, my stories are nothing compared to most, and we've all had those similar experiences, and whilst mine's sort of specific to the police,
I think you should always respect your own story here as well, because you know,
I'm not very good at preaching what I practice.
Absolutely.
Or the other way around.
It's everybody, like you said, has their story, and we're all unique, aren't we? And who's to say that your story is nothing compared with? I don't think you can say that. Well, I know a bit about your story. You've got a hell of a story, but even some people, I suppose that's the thing. You talked about the chief in the fire service and Grenfell being a massive definitive moment. You've had massive definitive moments in yours, but sometimes it can be just a series of these smaller, which tips it, doesn't it?
And there's always going to be that straw that breaks the camel's back. There we say, that sudden bolt out of the blue, and it catches the best of us off guard.
Even just that broken glass.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's just,
you know,
that's it. Had enough. So and
you often, if at all, see it coming. And when it does come, it's very explosive, and it's very destroying, you know.
And you're putting that message out there. That's great.
And I think the big thing with the message is, whilst it's an uncomfortable sort of taboo subject matter to talk about, when you do have, dare we say, a moment, it's completely normal. And whilst it is uncomfortable and it's scary and it's frightening and all the rest of it, and it's completely out of your control, your reaction at that time is completely normal to the abnormal set of circumstances that have brought you to that point. You should never feel ashamed or embarrassed.
No.
And
people do, don't they?
Absolutely. You know, and we shouldn't. And it's easy to say that sitting here today, because I've had that experience. I couldn't get my head round why I was behaving in the manner that I was, why I had a complete, utter physical and mental breakdown. I just couldn't even function, you know. And it's happened a couple of times to me, you know. One, I'll say, embarrassingly, I was out with a wife and my kids. We was going to a concert in Milton Keynes, and this was a few years ago, and we couldn't park where we were supposed to park. Although we bought the tickets for the parking, it was oversubscribed, so we had to park about a mile away from the venue. I don't know Milton Keynes at all. I thought I remembered where I parked the car. I thought I remembered the street name. When it comes, now we all got separated. I sent the wife and the kids off to the gig to watch the Foo Fighters whilst I was trying to park the car. Couldn't spend the evening with the family because I couldn't get to where they were in the Milton Keynes Bowl. We managed to meet up at the end of the gig because the comms down there for your mobile phone was absolutely useless. But we all met up, and then it was to go and find the car. Do you think I could find the car? I was asking local police officers. People there were there allegedly to support you and direct you. And it was almost I was talking in a native tongue from a land far, far away. No one was getting it. And I ended up collapsing on the floor, crying. I was in such a state, and then embarrassed. And then all this, oh, blimey, my boys are here, my wife's here. They're watching this big roughy tufty bloke just collapse because he can't find his bloody car. The drive home was an experience. No one spoke in the car, and my kids were sort of teenagers then. And we got home, and I just again, had another massive breakdown. I didn't see it coming. I don't know where it came from. You know, and the following morning, the kids, because they were sort of learning to deal with my mental health, you know, I think it was my oldest lad. He'd just go up and said, "Oh, all right, Dad." And I was like, "Yeah." He said, "There's a car outside." And he started laughing, and that was a bit of an icebreaker. And I was like, "Yeah, I think so." I said, "You better come out and help me look for it." And we just opened the front door and the car was there, and we just started laughing.
Yeah.
And to me, that was like
a release.
Yeah. However, if he'd have said that the night before, I don't know what my reaction would have been. So, you know, we can sort of look back on things like that and go, yeah, it was embarrassing, it was uncomfortable, but it needed to happen because it was just a little bit of steam coming out from that pressure cooker, all that trauma over the years. But as soon as that was released, then it was like the lid was screwed down again and we crack on until unfortunately the next time. And again, you're very often not prepared, you don't see it coming, and it could be something that's on the TV, something you've listened to on the radio, it could be anything.
So it still triggers, and that
even now
it's how you, again,
it's how you manage it,
learning how to.
And I think this is one of the big.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the biggest battles that we have is, you know, we talk quite openly about mental health and the impact that post-traumatic stress has on you, but it's down to you to try and manage it as best you can, to learn your triggers, to understand your triggers, and try and work with them.
I suppose that's it, is the recognition, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm acknowledging this. This is what happens, and I suppose that's half the battle then, isn't it?
So again, what I sort of suggest to people is something I was told, and I sort of initially poo-pooed it because it was like hard work, but it was just simply to write down that experience, and then if you're able to write down a method of dealing with it, then just close that book, close that page, turn the page over, forget about it, go and get a bit of fresh air, do something that's going to relax or help you to relax, whether it be reading, listen to a bit of music, drawing, walk the dog, whatever, and then refer back to that a little bit later, because if you were starting to learn and manage your triggers, use that as an aid memoir, because straight away you feel yourself getting very tense and angry and whatever else, and if that book or bit of paper was to hand, you could look at it and then go, oh yeah, I did that when I was feeling like this.
Yeah.
But you might have a different response to it. Write it down, close it, walk away, and
it's getting it out of your head as well.
Exactly.
If you write it down,
and then you can often just, you know, pass it on to other people and just say, well, when I was feeling how you were feeling, this is what I did. It might not work for you. Someone said to me about, they looked at one of my entries and went, bloody hell mate, that's a deep poem. I'm like, it's not a poem, it's just a load of angry words. No mate, that's a great poem. You want to put that out there. So I've now got...
I'm waiting for the book now.
So on the laptop there's over 72,000 angry words sitting there.
Excellent.
But if that's a method that might help somebody else, then that's great. Let's just share that experience. You know, for me, you know, that's a lot of words, because I'm still a bit of an angry badger. I still have my moments, you know. I'm a hell of a lot better than I was. You know, my relationship, my family is incredible now, whereas it was so destructive in the early sort of days from 2005 onwards up until 2014.
So well done, because you know, a lot of marriages, they don't survive it, do they?
Yeah.
So
we got close to divorce. You know, it's again, it's not something that, you know, I sort of like to reflect on, but that's how it was. And you know, a lot of people, it sadly ends up in that manner. You know, and it's so disruptive and destructive. And all because I couldn't or didn't want to talk to someone. You know, who knows? Had I spoken to someone, I'd have been a 20-plus year copper now. Debatable given today's standards of policing, but you know, it's, let's just get that encouragement out there for the men and women across the board. whether you're just boots on the ground, and I don't mean that loosely, or if you're a supervisor. Let's just encourage people to start talking.
I mean, we do talk to a lot of people within the services, and a lot of them will say, I've got the best job in the world.
Yeah.
And what a shame that we're not supporting that a hell of a lot more, because they're saying it's the best job in the world. They're doing incredible job at protecting and caring for her. So who is looking after them? Yeah. So, and that's the big message, isn't it? Yeah. Who is?
And I would sort of really endorse what you just said, because as far as I'm concerned, other than the military and a few other little bits and pieces I've done, the police was the best job.
Right.
I loved it. The camaraderie, the teamwork, the feeling of purpose and success. You know, even if you hadn't managed to save a life or whatever, you'd done your best, and your best was improved every day you turn up to work, because there was always a different scenario, unfortunately, to work with and to deal with. But I can tell you now, man on my heart, that it didn't always go my way, but I knew that I could walk out of that nick knowing that I'd done my best. I didn't see what was coming in relation to the PTSD. However, you know, even reflecting on that now, it's...
Do you think that is generally the case as well? People don't see it.
Yeah.
They don't actually recognise that they've got PTSD.
No. You know, the trauma, it comes in so many different disguises. You know, whether it be vicarious, i.e. people who are taking those calls on the radios, you know, taking those messages, delivering those documents to court, but they've had to go through that process of reading every descriptive word and ensuring that it gets to where it needs to be. Yeah. But equally, you know, who's there to help them? They've just read that documentation. They've just looked at those images, you know, whether it be looking at audio clips of acts of terrorism, or stuff that's caught on CCTV of a very, dare we say, descriptive nature, like a murder or something like that. Who's there for them? The call takers that take those calls with those horrible voices and screams that they can hear coming from the person who's making that call, because they've then got to relay that information to us. We then, we acknowledge that call, get in the car, the van, whatever, put the blue lights on, and we've just got a very rough picture, a very rough detail of what we're going to be going to. And it's not until you get to that job that then it all becomes quite apparent. But you've only got there because of the person in the control room.
Yeah.
Who's there for them? Yeah. You know, the scenes of crimes officers, you know, the list just goes on and on and on. It's huge, and there should be a bigger and better sort of aspect of looking after those individuals, because again, people, you know, see our emergency services turn up to jobs because that's what we do. However, what about the people in the background? The people you don't get to see. In my book, they're the forgotten heroes. Yeah. They're the people that are passing that dreadful information over to you to go and respond to. Because just remember, any part of emergency services is just a reactive job, because the nasty stuff has often already happened, or is happening whilst you're trying to get there. So you're reacting to something that's already happened. However, the person in the call centre has listened to that from the point of the phone going. So they're already, dare we say, involved and wrapped up in that incident long before we ever are. So, you know,
and how many calls are they taking? In
hundreds, thousands of calls. You know, it's
putting down those headphones and getting in the car and, like you say,
there's no room for decompression. It's the expectation they'll just do it, and you know, there should be something there, but invariably there isn't. But again, they are moving forward now across the board, and I've seen that in relation to some of the forces we've been to present to, that they are now actively engaging in looking after their people, their officers, the back sort of backroom staff, you know, which is great.
And your initiative is growing, and at that point I'll introduce Dave, who's joined us. So hello. Dave Elsom.
Thank you.
Lovely to meet you. Long old chat with Gary. Would you like to just tell us how you met Gary and a little bit of background? Dare I ask?
Well, I guess it was at one of the events at the PTSD999 events. I'm trying to think which one that would have been.
It was ages ago.
It was a long time ago, a few years ago now. And yeah, we got chatting, and obviously Gary's explained what they were trying to achieve, and you know, and then hearing Gary's sort of story as well, and then it was just like, I want to be part of this. I want to try and support this in any way that I can. So sort of my role is very much behind the scenes, usually. I was only coming to give you moral support. I didn't realise I was actually going to be. Suddenly it's like, come and sit down. I was like, oh. Yeah, so it was just really trying to help. So Gary kindly invited me to be a trustee and a director, because just the technicalities meant that Gary couldn't be a director anymore, the way we're going forward. So we sort of sat down and had a look at the next steps, which was the charitable commission submission, which has now gone in as well. So we sort of set originally our first sort of stab at that. It'll make such a difference. So yeah, so it's been that really, and sort of and then a contact of mine is Helen Peake from the accountants side of it, and she's come in and given us some really good advice as well. So it's sort of my part is really behind the scenes and making sure we're in a, you know, that we're compliant and that we're doing the things that we said.
Excellent. Compliance, that's massive, isn't it? So
yeah, unfortunately,
nobody
likes rules.
But, yeah, it's getting the right people on your team, isn't it? And using their strengths to help you move forward with this. You can't do it on your own, Gary, can you? So,
no, you know, as I said earlier on, I'm really blessed to have Dave and Dave's experience of business, and the way that sort of structure works. And Dave will always say, "Oh, I don't really do anything. I'm just sort of," but he is so pivotal to what we do, because he's, dare I say, he's almost like, you know, when you're about to make a decision, you've got that little devil on one shoulder just saying, just go and do it. And then Dave will pop up on the other shoulder and go, right, hold on a minute, let's just look at this for what it is. You know, in down to the construction of an email, he'll pick me up on my grammar, and it's brilliant. You know, so it's just great that we've got such a, dare I say, a diverse group of people, mate, and it is brilliant. And it is, and that's such a pleasing thing. You know, we've had over the years some experiences, haven't we? People have come, people have gone, and we've had to clear up a lot of misery, for want of a better word.
Legacy.
Legacy is an even better word. But we've done it because not only have we got that working relationship, we're both singing off the same song sheet, and on top of that, we're good mates, you know, and that helps.
You're dealing with a very emotive topic, aren't you? So to have people around you, like you say, who just, whoa, just a minute, you know, that's pretty crucial, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we'll speak to each other, probably not as regularly, I can't even say the word, as often as we should, but, you know, when we do, we might have that chat. Yeah. And it's just sort of like, that's been half hour well spent.
And let's face it, you know, we're talking about connecting, aren't we? That's the whole basis, the core of what you're wanting to do. So if you can get key people involved in that, which you're doing now, that's fantastic. Yeah. So, well, we're here to offer any services we can. We've talked about using this space, haven't we? Yeah. And that's absolutely, I know Charlotte and Leanne are going to drive things on for you from our perspective as to what we can input for you. But I don't know, is there anything else you want to say at this point? I'm just really, really grateful for your time today.
No, I mean,
I know you're going to go and talk to Charlotte, and
I mean, there's never going to be enough thanks from us to you for, you know, for taking us on board and making this partnership move forward in the right way that we are. You know, I'm just so grateful again that we're now all part of quite a progressive team thing, and it's, from my perspective, it's very humbling when people such as yourselves are willing, I'm not going to say to take that risk, but are willing to engage in what is a very difficult subject matter and help drive it forward. You know, I think it's imperative that, you know, it shouldn't just be mine and Dave's voice and the rest of the team. You know, we need to look outside of those blinkers and get that engagement, and just encourage everyone, no matter what you're doing as a career or whatever path you're going down, just have that ability to be able to talk to someone. And if you can't talk to your peers at work or your management, then talk to us. You know, that's what we're there for.
That's brilliant, isn't it? Because everybody needs to get that message. But I mean, we're just so aware that there was a big hole there for emergency services, in all fairness, and thank you.
No, thank you guys. I mean, it's just,
so we can't do enough really. If we can, you know, if we can do it, we will do it, because
brilliant. You know, so when I met Leanne for the first time, again, it just seemed to be the right time, the right place for us to have that chat, and then to have that follow-up chat, and then we're here visiting you for a second time.
She'll make it happen for you.
Yeah, I know, I'm absolutely. And this is the thing. It's just that for me, it's such a comforting thing, because I mean, Dave sort of just lent into it a little bit there. We've had a bit of a legacy that we've had to clear up, and I guess that's part of the growing up process with it. But to have good people like you guys on board, who are clearly quite passionate about what we're doing, well then let's just put our arms around each other and crack on. You know what I mean?
It's just that massive, you know, awareness of what's going off out there, and we make. I mean, these are our customers. These are our audience, and from the offset, we've had that. From the onset, we've had that. You know, absolute company ethos that we need to understand where our customers are coming from. So we've made it our business to, you know, get their stories out there and listen to what they're saying, and so it's at the core of this company, and we're proud to do that, really. So
it's refreshing.
Engage with you guys.
Very much so, yeah.
So thank you.
No, thank you. Seriously, thank you very much for having us.